Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well today. If you're new here, it's great to have you. Pull up a seat and let's talk about something that's got a lot of people buzzing. So picture this. Your city's trains, buses, and long-planned upgrades suddenly lose billions in funding, not because the money ran out, but because it was deliberately frozen during a government standoff. That's exactly what's happening right now in Chicago. The Trump administration has just paused about $2.1 billion in federal funding meant for major transit projects in the city. These aren't small upgrades or hypothetical future plans. These are already approved projects that communities have been counting on. We're talking about things like the Red Line extension on Chicago's South Side and big modernization efforts to the Red and Purple lines. These projects were meant to connect neighborhoods that have been overlooked for decades. So, why is the money suddenly on hold? According to the administration, the official reason is that they want to make sure the funds aren't tied to what they call race-based contracting. They're targeting the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, also known as DB, which is designed to help minority-owned small businesses get fair access to government contracts. The White House says they're reviewing whether these programs violate constitutional limits around race and sex in contracting. But critics are calling this more than a review. They're calling it political punishment. That brings up a really important question. When does policy enforcement become political leverage? And how do everyday people tell the difference? This isn't happening in isolation either. Just a few days earlier, about $18 billion earmarked for subway and rail projects in New York was also frozen during the same shutdown battle. So, is this about policy? Or is it about pressuring Democratic-run cities during budget negotiations? And honestly, does the reason even matter to the people who depend on public transit to get to work, school, or the doctor? Let's break down what's at stake for Chicago specifically. The Red Line extension is intended to bring rapid transit further into the South Side, an area with large Black communities that have historically been underfunded and underserved. People there saw this project as a long-overdue step toward equity, jobs, and access. The other big effort, the Red and Purple Modernization, is aimed at fixing aging tracks and stations to improve service reliability. Both projects are already in motion. So imagine hearing that a $300 million reimbursement has just been stalled, mid-work, during a federal shutdown. How do city planners even budget around that? And what happens to the people hired for those projects? One congressman from Illinois described it as a bad day for public transit when something so essential becomes a bargaining chip. Community leaders are calling it unfair, and Chicago's mayor says the city will use every tool available to fight it. But here's the thing, even if the money comes through later, the damage is kind of already done. Every delay means higher costs, missed deadlines, and stalled hiring. And it sends a message to cities everywhere. Can they really count on federal commitments anymore? But let's flip the perspective for a second. Even if you completely agreed with the idea of removing race-based criteria from government contracts, is freezing active infrastructure projects the way to do it? Should entire communities lose out while the paperwork gets sorted? Or are there better ways to address concerns about fairness without grinding progress to a halt? Here's another angle. Infrastructure projects are not quick fixes. They take years of planning, partnerships, and budgets at every level. So what happens when the federal government pauses its share right after promising it? Could that discourage cities from taking on major projects in the future? And what kind of precedent does that set for future shutdowns? Jobs are on the line too. Construction workers, contractors, local suppliers, all of them could be affected if the money doesn't flow. And we're not just talking paychecks. We're talking about ripple effects, small businesses, local economies, and long-term neighborhood development. How many times have we seen communities motivate around a new transportation hub, only to have everything slow down because of politics at the top? And then there's the bigger picture. This is happening during a federal shutdown. Over time, shutdowns have gone from rare emergencies to regular pressure tactics. But here's the tricky part. The executive branch ends up deciding which programs to freeze or spare. Technically, Congress controls spending, but when everything grinds to a halt, the White House chooses what gets funded and what doesn't. Should any administration, no matter who's in office, have that kind of power to pick and choose during a shutdown? It also raises another thought. If the projects were approved through legal, competitive federal processes, do cities have grounds to sue when that funding gets paused? Could this turn into a major legal fight between states and the federal government? And would that drag things out even longer for the communities affected on the ground? All of this leaves regular people asking some pretty relatable questions. Why does public transit keep becoming a political battlefield? Why are neighborhoods that already struggle always the first to lose out? And when the government says pause, who actually pays the price? To be fair, supporters of the freeze argue that laws have to be enforced consistently, even during a shutdown. They say it's about upholding fairness in government contracting. But is halting billions of dollars in live transit projects really the only option? Or is this a way to pressure political opponents into negotiations? So, what do you think? Should federal funding tied to infrastructure be untouchable during shutdowns? Or do you agree that the administration is justified in pausing money if it believes there's a legal issue? And beyond that, should transit and infrastructure ever be used as negotiation leverage in partisan fights? I'm really curious how people feel about this. Even if you don't live in Chicago or New York, this could affect your city next. If funding can be frozen after it's been promised, it could change the way local governments plan everything from trains to bridges to disaster recovery. All right, that's where things stand for now. As this story evolves, there may be lawsuits, negotiations, or new statements from Congress and city officials. And if cities like Chicago push back hard, we could see a major debate over who really controls infrastructure dollars once they've already been allocated. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and exploring this. If you found this video useful, thought-provoking, or even just interesting to follow, don't forget to hit that like button. It seriously helps the channel. And if you want more clear breakdowns like this one, go ahead and subscribe. Share this with a friend who follows politics, transit, or city planning, and let's keep the conversation going. I appreciate you being here, and I'll catch you in the next one.